views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
And hello, everyone, and welcome to Open, the one and only show that opens the Bronx and the rest of the world right to you. I'm your host, Daren Jaime, and today we'll update you on what's happening in and around our world, as well as around the Bronx and New York City. Coming up straight on our show, we'll discuss the extension of eviction moratorium protection for tenants affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. Also, May is National Nurses Month. We're going to look at how home care nurses are helping members of the community live their best lives. And then a little later on in the show, we'll talk about how one company is producing premium quality goods all throughout the city. And yes, they have a major announcement. And finally, we'll learn how the New York Foundling is making sure students have access to the mental health services they need. So we encourage you to stay tuned because all this and much more is heading your way. Right now, we're officially open. And hello, everyone. I'm Daren Jaime, and welcome to Open. Today is Wednesday, May the 12th, and you're watching Open, a live and interactive program that brings the Bronx and New York City straight to your TV sets. We also want to welcome our viewers on Manhattan Neighborhood Network, as Open is being broadcast live simultaneously on the MNN's channel. We encourage you to stay connected to us on our social media platforms at BronxNet TV, and then also our website at bronxnet.org. Well, a lot has been going on throughout the course of this past week, and we can't take you through everything, but we can take you through a couple of things with our Bronx updates. We start off with MTA news. New York State Governor Andrew Cuomo announced that New York will fully open MTA subway services. The 24-hour subway service will return to New York City on Monday, May the 17th. The restoration comes just after about a year after the governor ordered the system to be shut down overnight for COVID cleaning and also ordering homeless riders out of stations. The changes come as vaccination rates climb and COVID cases plummet, prompting the governor to also announce the lifting of capacity limits for most businesses beginning Wednesday, May 19th. Restaurants, museums, theaters, and retail stores, as well as other businesses, will be allowed to reopen at full capacity in just over a week in the Empire State. In other news, the council legislation looks to protect small businesses from excessive fees by inspectors as they look to reopen. Our BronxNet reporter, Arlene Makoko, brings us the story right now.
Small businesses still reeling from the impact of a global pandemic have more to be concerned about, says City Council member Vanessa Gibson, who introduced legislation to stem the onslaught of fees by city agency inspectors that could derail a strong economic comeback.
Instead of imposing punitive fines on them, we must help to educate and provide outreach to each of our businesses, and equally important, provide the resources and the support that is necessary for them to operate their businesses.
Outside Yankee Tavern and joined by Bronx Chamber of Commerce President Lisa Soren, Executive Director of the 3rd Avenue Business Improvement District Michael Brady, and Chairman of the 161st Street Bid Dr. Carrie Goodman, Councilmember Gibson talked about the proposal that would force the city to work with owners who've demonstrated their commitment by either opening their doors during the pandemic or reopening after being shut down by working with them through non-health and safety violations.
I had a business call me yesterday. They got a $100 fee because they didn't have the DOT sticker on their window. This is a business that opened up in March of last year and was shut down immediately. How about somebody telling them that this is what's needed?
And along with that, outreach by the city on their new restaurant revitalization grant program, as the application process is set to begin shortly. Also there, Francisco Marte, who says he was threatened with closure by an inspector for not having a cooking instrument be the right weight.
He said, if you don't have an upgrade, I'm gonna shut you down. That's not the way you approach. Even that day I called Vanessa's office.
That's when the inspector had a change of heart.
And then he went back, and he was so nice, and he said, oh, everything is fine. Everything is fine, you're good.
And Yankee Tavern, that opened its doors to business in 1927. Last year, they reopened in accordance to CDC guidelines, says current owner Joe Bastone, but that didn't come without a price.
Personally, I've gone through over $150,000 of my personal money to keep my place open. We were open the entire time, even though I was bleeding money, thousands of dollars a week, and then I'm still losing money.
This just one of the many examples that demonstrate a need for laws to protect businesses.
This legislation would provide civil penalty relief for small businesses from certain sanitation, health-related, transportation, consumer affairs, noise control, and buildings violations.
Something, if enacted, would speed along the Bronx's recovery.
It is time for us to invest in our small businesses smartly, and part of that is removing these insidious regulations, totaling over 6,000 right now in New York City, so our city's businesses can grow and we can truly be a comeback borough, a comeback city.
This bill will go a long way because it's still holding businesses accountable, but it's relieving a bit of the burden, and that's what we need right now.
Well, the legislation was introduced into the City Council in March, and right now it's waiting for a vote from the full council. For BronxNet, this is Arlene Makoko.
And thank you, Arlene. And that's all the time we have for our Bronx updates. We encourage you to stay with us. We've got a great show here on Open coming up right after this.
We know that people are dealing with the health crisis, but there's also a lot of food insecurity.
We're giving out healthy food options, and that's what's key here.
If you're a senior, you have a disability, they'll actually deliver meals to you.
The residents are anxious, they're worried, they're scared, they want to be tested.
When things were happening in our community, and we couldn't get the help.
There's almost a presumption of criminality that attaches to your skin color.
The site will prioritize those who are at highest risk in the population.
If you feel symptoms and you'd like to visit one of these COVID-19 testing sites here in the Bronx, you may call the State Health Department's hotline.
Important to note about this site is no reservations are needed. This is a walk-in clinic.
A lot of us are out of work and looking for something to do.
We have the machinery and the skills to make large scales of these masks and gowns.
Take care of your people. It's gonna go way further than we actually can understand.
Right now, employees like myself are just adjusting
To the new reality.
And welcome back to the show. Well, in recent news, lawmakers passed a bill to extend eviction protection for tenants affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, this new extension will continue to ensure that New York tenants, as well as homeowners and business owners, as well as small landlords, will not have to fear losing their homes or businesses. But the real question is, what will this actually mean moving forward? Joining us now to share a little bit more about these details is the partner at David A. Gallo and Associates LLP, Robert Link. And Robert, good to have you back. And I'll start off like this. We did say a year ago that when this extension was going to happen, you predicted actually a year. Nobody actually predicted we would be to this place. And now a further extension into August. What does this all really mean?
It's funny you say that, Daren, and thanks for having me on. When I came on about a year ago, you asked me, when are we going to see things pick up? And I think I said, it's not going to happen. And at the time, I think you were kind of taken aback by the fact I said, nothing's going to happen in the year 2020. You know, we're going to wait till 2021 and then things are going to pick up. Now we're here in 2021, and I think the news is really things aren't going to pick up to 2022. This most recent law, what it does is any case where a hardship declaration is filed, and right now that's about 40,000 cases, but with the announcement of the law, I think the expectations are that number is going to significantly grow. If you file the hardship declaration form, you're safe. You cannot be evicted until August 31st of 2021. Now, what happens after August 31st, 2021? If there's a further extension, it remains to be seen. Lawmakers won't be in session August 31st. At least they're not scheduled to be in session at that time. So they would need to come back into like a special session in order to, extend a further moratorium. But you got to read this law in connection with the $2.4 billion that was passed with the budget. That $2.4 billion is dedicated to paying off past due rent arrears. So landlords or tenants who are in default more than 12 months can try to get a piece of that money and apply it towards their rent arrears. And the landlords, if they accept that money, they cannot evict. So that's where we're headed. We're going to see how this program is promulgated, and we're going to see the next steps from there. But we're a long way away. Now we're over a year into this process. We are a long way away from business being back to normal in the housing courts, particularly in New York City.
Yeah, but you look at that $2.4 billion. I've talked with several landlords who said, listen, if I don't get my hands on any of that, I could potentially be stuck. And $2.4 billion sounds like a lot of money, but the reality is when you go across New York City, you go across New York State, that money can be dried up quickly, particularly with the amount of people that are currently in arrears. The question I have is, what other recourse does a landlord have if I don't get my hands on that money and I still got a tenant who's not paying there?
Well, you're 100% right. It's probably not enough money for all the default that we had. And by the time it gets delivered, people are going to be 12 months in arrears, 18 months in arrears, 2 years in arrears by this time the money gets handed out. So the question becomes, now what does the landlord do? What we're seeing the landlord do, particularly in the commercial context, but you're also seeing it in the residential context, the landlord says, well, I'm not going to wait around for some indefinite amount of time when the courts put my case on for a calendar hearing or this moratorium is up. I'm not going to wait. So they're bringing against some tenants where you have a guarantee, and they're bringing collections actions. So I have restaurants or a hookah lounge where they're personally liable for the payments under the lease. The tenant is personally liable. So you'll see, rather than bringing the eviction, they'll bring a collections action, which is right now permitted. Now, there are some protections in New York City where there's a third party. Let's say my dad or my mother-in-law guarantees my lease and my default is limited to a COVID-19 period. Under New York City, most recently passed New York City law, in my hypothetical, the landlord couldn't go after my my mother-in-law for that portion of the lease. They'd have to go after me directly.
Yeah. Let's play this scenario out. Let's say we go all the way to the end of this new moratorium, and I still got a tenant, and that tenant has to be evicted. Well, now we enter into the court system. Here you come. Let's talk about this, because once you put it out there in the court system and you file the necessary paperwork, just because I'm trying to evict possibly in August, I may not see a potential court date until when? 2022?
Oh, yeah, definitely 2022. Listen, if you go to the Bronx, part of me thinks, really this extension of the moratorium to August 31st really isn't that big of a deal. It's really only 40,000 cases. We have hundreds of thousands of cases that are already out there that no one has filed out a hardship declaration, that may be already in the system, have been pending for a year or more in the housing courts. So from some aspect, this isn't that big of a deal. What is a big deal is that we're really not processing the housing court cases that are there. If you go to the Bronx housing court right now, you go down there today on the Grand Concourse, there's a line that goes down the street. They let in one person at a time, and you get to speak with a clerk. And then after you speak with the clerk, you get to leave the line. Maybe you file your hardship declaration. Maybe you get information about an adjournment. You leave that line, and then they let in a second person. Now, in addition to that, they're doing remote hearings, and some cases are moving forward with trials and conferences and whatnot. But we are not even close to handling the cases where there is no hardship declaration in an expedited way or in a routine or normal way. In fact, I think the Judge DeFiore, the head of the Office of Court Administration, just announced this week that they're starting to return full staffing levels, 75, 80% upstate. So perhaps that is an announcement or an indication that things will pick up, but I'm not expecting a significant amount of evictions in 2021. This is definitely going to be put into 2022, probably the summer of 2022, before you really see a real uptick in activity.
We've heard the popular phrase in the business world, the customer is always right. But when we look at these moratorium laws, it looks as though the tenant is always right. So give me, from a lawyer's perspective, what kind of counsel do you give a landlord who may have to stick it out for an extended period of time now?
Well, I've been saying it since, more than a year now, speaking to my landlord clients and the tenant clients, make a deal. If there's an opportunity for you to take some money, a portion of the money, you want to make the deal. You also want to see if you have a guarantee on your lease, and you want to consider the idea of bringing a collections action. And the other thing that the landlords have looked at over the last year and a half is challenging the constitutionality of some of these laws. There's an understanding that a contract is sacred in the law. Right. So, and in fact, the federal constitution provides that the government shall not impair an existing contract. That's kind of been set aside, or there's been an opening for interpretation of that general principle because of the severity of this pandemic and this just once in a lifetime nature of this pandemic. We're seeing exceptions to that. And a lot of the actions that have challenged the constitutionality of these laws have failed thus far. So perhaps at some point in time, the courts view this as an overreach, but that's really the only check at this point. The only other check is, I would say, watching some of the debate this week, you are starting to see some of the more moderate upstate Democrats side with Republicans in being a little bit more reluctant to support some of these very pro-tenant moratoriums and extensions of the moratorium. So we'll see where that goes. And I do have to preface one other fact that Governor Cuomo hasn't yet signed off on the August 31st extension of the moratorium. That could come any day. That could come by the end of the week. I anticipate it's going to come. But a lot of times he likes to put his thumb on the scale and give his imprimatur on matters that are pending. He still wants to show his relevance, and whether or not he raises any objections that cause an amendment to the law or a reconsideration of the law, we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, it's going to be a wait and see approach. But in the interim, though, a lot of things to really be able to hash out. If you're a tenant, let's play this out too. And you've got a tenant-landlord dispute prior to COVID. Where do you stand right now by way of the court system?
What the court system should be doing is that they should be having a conference. The moratorium says that if you have a warrant of eviction, right, pre-pandemic, pre-March of 2020, if you are already, as a landlord, entitled to perform an eviction, to carry out the eviction, before that eviction goes forward, you have to have a conference with the court and with the other party, and they have to check and see that they got somewhere else to go and see if they may be eligible for aid under the COVID Relief Act, and look at all of these options. So that is one thing that's going to be taken into consideration. The other thing the law does is if you have a if you have a case that was pending in front of you and they haven't had a judgment, the court hasn't, or the landlord hasn't obtained a judgment against you yet for failing to pay the rent or for holdover or for whatever, the landlord has to prove, and the court has to actually conduct a hearing to see whether or not you had an opportunity, you were served with a blank hardship declaration form. So whether or not the court is going to have an opportunity to conduct thousands upon thousands of hearings to make sure the tenant received this form remains to be seen. It's going to be done virtually. Some tenants are going to have an opportunity to appear virtually, because of internet access or whatever. So we're going to see how this all plays out, but it really puts a gum in the works of an already overburdened and complicated system.
Well, when I first met you about a year ago, you did have a prediction. I'm gonna come back now, a year later. What's your prediction?
I think, maybe summer of 2022 is what we're probably looking at. We're going to start to see some of this money be handed out, some of the 2.4 billion. It's going to become evident that either there's a good amount of money to go around, or this isn't even a drop in the bucket. And then you'll start to see, these courts take cases on little by little by little. And first they'll deal with the defaults from pre-March of 2017, and they're going to deal with everything that was filed over the summer and has been sitting without a court hearing date before that. And then, there's going to be defenses that are going to be interposed that the courts have never dealt with before. There's been numerous executive orders, there's been new laws, and there are going to be attorneys advocating for one interpretation versus another interpretation of these laws. And those cases are going to go up to the appellate term and the appellate division, and we'll have an idea what exactly those laws mean. So, this process of appeals and interpreting the laws and getting through the system, it's going to take well into 2022 to really have a meaningful look at a majority of the pending cases and get an idea of where this is going for the next 2 to 5 years.
Yeah. So I guess the long and short of it is there's going to be longer, and there are no real short-term wins here.
No, this is an immense, once-in-a-lifetime situation. The courts are not prepared to handle it. They're opening the door ever so slightly so that we can begin to look at some of these cases. We can distribute the $2.4 billion, and how it ends up is anyone's guess, but I can tell you from a certainty, it's going to be very, very slow.
Yeah. Well, Robert, thank you so much for being with us again, bringing us up to speed. Of course, we will continue to follow these developments and more as they continue to unfold, and they seem to unfold kind of rapidly and unexpectedly. But thank you for bringing us the updates and bringing us up to speed.
Daren, thanks a lot. Glad to be here.
All righty. For more information, you can find out more about Robert at his website. And listen, we encourage you stay connected to us here on Open. We'll continue right after this. And welcome back. Well, today is May the 12th, and it is the last day of National Nurses Week. And whether it's a national emergency or routine daily care, nurses' vital contributions impact the health and well-being of our communities. BronxNet is celebrating National Nurses Month throughout the month of May by introducing you to nurses from the Visiting Nurse Service of New York who serve the community in different ways. VNSNY has programs assisting individuals with severe mental health conditions. And here to share a little bit more is nurse practitioner at VNSNY Bronx ACT team, Andrea Abramoff. And Andrea, good to have you here on Open.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So happy Nurses Month, Nurses Week. We're glad to have you and to be able to share a little bit about the work that you do. And I know that you work particularly in the area of mental health. Talk about your work as a nurse in the field of mental health.
Sure. I work for the VNSNY Bronx ACT team, and ACT stands for Assertive Community Treatment. What we provide is really true wraparound care for the most severely mentally ill in the community, people with very unstable lives, and we try to provide a measure of stability. We have a team of comprised of a nurse practitioner, psychiatrist, family therapist, social work, substance abuse therapist, vocational therapist. I hope I'm not missing anybody, but we see our patients 6 times a month and make sure that they really connect to the care that'll improve their recovery.
Yeah, and talk about caring for your patients. Obviously, all of us have been hampered by the COVID-19 pandemic. What has it been like for you really trying to navigate the season of COVID-19 and being able to provide care for your patients?
That's a great question. It's been quite a year, as I'm sure everybody realizes, but for us, we were out there the whole time, especially the nurses on our staff had to be out there pretty much every day providing hands-on care. And at the beginning, it was about getting enough PPE and then figuring out how to do things safely. But our patients still needed to get their medications and their injections and see us because a lot of other services weren't running. And, at times like that, the need really went up for what we do.
Did you find that things got a little bit harder for you, particularly because of COVID-19? Many people dealing with isolation, people also dealing with depression. And if you're dealing with mental health issues, obviously, these are things that can be further exacerbated, particularly during a pandemic.
100%. Yeah, I think it was in a particularly challenging time for us. We had a period at the beginning of the pandemic where the hospitals weren't really accepting psychiatric patients. So we were dealing with patients that were at a much higher level of acuity in the community as the hospitals were transitioning to COVID treatments. Much of our care went telehealth, like for everybody. And that was a challenge because not all of our clients had access to stable internet and telephones. And so a lot of it was providing phones out to people and teaching them how to use technology to connect with us. We really had to stay flexible. I mean, the ACT team is designed to be flexible, but we've never quite had to be this flexible before in how we provide the care. So we learned a lot for sure.
Talk to me a little bit about being a nurse. And obviously we're celebrating National Nurses Month and also Week. But what does it mean to be a nurse for you? I mean, obviously working in the field, you can take things day to day, but for somebody who doesn't know about the day-to-day work, what does it mean to be a nurse and what would you want people to know?
I love being a nurse. I'll just start there. I think it was probably the best decision of my life. I recommend all the young people in my life to go into nursing. But it's because if you care about people and you care about making a difference in people's lives, you go out there and you meet the people that you're caring for, you get to know them, their families, and you get to see the difference you make. And for me, that's been the most rewarding. And I would say the pandemic has certainly, I think, made most nurses sort of reflect on, why they do the work they do and what it means. We certainly lost many colleagues in healthcare this year. It's really been devastating. And, I'm just so proud of my nurse colleagues that, choose to get out there every day and continue to provide the care that's needed in the community to make a difference in people's lives.
Yeah. What has been the biggest challenge for you? Because obviously a lot to contend with throughout the course of this past year. What has been the biggest challenge?
I think the biggest challenge is just the transition to not being able to be out there as freely and transporting around the city as carefree as we used to. A lot of things we took for granted about having places to do our work. Like we work in the field, so we work remotely. We have to stop and check computers and write notes and stuff in between visits sometimes. And in the logistics of, there's no Starbucks to drop in. I think we really had to plan our work quite differently than we ever had before and create a sense of team without seeing each other for a year. We met on Zoom almost daily, but we did, figuring out new ways to be a team when we don't get to see each other has been hard.
Yeah, and now that things have eased up a little bit, and we're seeing a lot more openings and progressive openings. Obviously, a little bit more intense on the work side. Talk to us about what that's like now that you have the ability to see patients a little bit more in that contact.
Yeah, it's really a breath of fresh air. I mean, I think we're just also happy about being able to get the vaccine. VNS was able to get the vaccine out to a lot of people really quickly, especially the workforce. So that just the reduction of the fear of getting infected by COVID has really allowed us to get back to normal in a really positive way, and appreciate how much we can do for people in normal times. Has been really a blessing.
Yeah. How much of that is a conversation piece, the vaccine, and talk about vaccination between your patients and whether or not they want to get the vaccine or are they vaccinated? How much of that is a regular conversation piece of the work that you're doing?
Every visit. Yeah, I mean, and yeah, as long as somebody hasn't been vaccinated yet, it's all about, can we help you get to get the vaccine? Can we talk to you about what's making you fearful about it? Where are you hesitant about it? What more information can we provide? I think that part of the severity of the mental illness and the instability and the lack of access to internet or regular communication that our patients are facing, it takes a very individualized approach to identifying what somebody's barriers are or concerns are, and addressing them, respectfully and in a way that's productive to keeping them safe. And, even if the vaccine's not for somebody, it's always a conversation about how to keep yourself safe.
Are you encountering a lot of hesitancy and or pushback about the vaccine in the conversations that you're having?
Yeah, I think our patient population kind of percentage-wise probably matches the country in terms of, there's maybe about half the people are just not sure that they're willing to take it. There's a good, strong percentage of people that are very excited to get it and want to get it at their first opportunity. And then there's many people that, have a lot of fear. I mean, COVID is a really scary thing. And I think everything around it can feel very scary for people. So just, kind of pacing with where they're at, meeting them where they're at. And, I feel very strongly in vaccinations, and it's really, I believe, our best approach out of this. But, I also respect that not everybody is, sees it that way.
Yeah, you have better boots on the ground than I do, and I'll ask the question about, when we talked to a couple of people about vaccine hesitancy, they said, listen, once the Johnson & Johnson had that kind of pause, that put the pause on their whole vaccination, looking to get the vaccination. Have you kind of got that same experience out in the field as well?
Yeah, we have. I think that I certainly have heard that, it's hard, and the media really latches on it. There's one death, there's one person that has a fatal blood clot, and not to say that that's not incredibly serious. And I do believe the pause was the right thing to do to figure out what it meant, and for the scientists to kind of catch up on knowing how to advise people how to move forward. I think it is such a scary outcome that, people, say, well, I'm okay without it right now. Maybe I shouldn't sign up for that. But when you look at the bigger pictures of, losing millions of infections across the country, and what that can mean, it's too bad, but it was the right science to put the pause on it. And I hope that people will still be able to find comfort that, that's an extraordinary low percentage of people that have had that happen.
Absolutely. Well, we want to thank you, Andrea Abramoff, for being with us. Congratulations on National Nurses Week and Nurse Month. And thank you for sharing and the great work that you're doing to improve our community. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
All righty. Well, I want to let you know now, if you want more information, don't hesitate to go ahead and visit the website. How do you do that? Well, you go to the website, VNSNY.org. If you want to pick up your phone and call, you can do that at 212-609-1525. We encourage you, don't go anywhere. We do have more Open coming up. Open returns right after this. back to the show. Abeles and Heymann, better known as A&H Kosher, have been dedicated to producing the most delectable, premium quality gourmet kosher hot dogs and provisions. For over 60 years, the Bronx-based company continued following the founding family's standards for quality, authenticity, and mission to provide the finest kosher provisions available. Now, the customers range from major club stores, supermarket chains, stadiums, and now online consumers. Joining us to share a little bit more of the details is the owner of Abeles and Heymann, Seth Leavitt. And good to have you, Seth, and glad to be with you. Glad to have you here with us here on Open.
Daren, thank you for having me on.
And so I guess as we talk about the history of your company, a Bronx base that has been a staple for many years. And of course, although you're not in the Bronx, your roots of your foundation come from the Bronx. Share with us a little bit about the Bronx experience.
The Bronx was a great experience. Our company started in 1954. The company was started by an uncle and a nephew. It was Oscar Abeles and Leopold Heymann. Oscar was already working in the provision business. He was making hot dogs in Washington Heights in New York City. He was a partner in a business, and he wanted to bring his nephew, Leopold, into the company. His partner at the time said no, so Oscar said, okay, have a good day, I'm leaving, and he walked away. And together, Lee and Oscar opened up a 2,500 square foot facility where they manufactured kosher hot dogs and deli meats from 1954 all the way up to, I believe, 2007.
Wow. Amazing story, and had roots in the Bronx. And as we said, you know, the company actually grew and didn't just grow from, you know, local neighborhoods, restaurants, and as we said, you know, stadiums and even, you know, great food chains.
Correct. And I'm very pleased to share with you that our hot dogs, they're available at, I call them better establishments, but in addition, you could find them at select Costco's, and we're in Trader Joe's nationwide as a branded hot dog.
That's awesome. How's it feel to actually go from where you were to where you are right now? And obviously, a lot of great things happening for the company and a lot of national recognition. What's it like as an owner to be able to see your product move in such a way?
It's almost like having a child and watching that child grow. You start out by changing diapers, you know, that's your job.
Right.
And then the child goes to school and gets an education and learns to take care of themselves. And before you know it, they're married. And it's similar to the food business. You start out in its infancy. You know, I learned how to make hot dogs from the original owner. And I wore many different hats in the company, like I'm wearing now. I did sales, I did production, I did marketing, you name it, I did it. And it's a great feeling to see the company grow and be able to hire people and expand and to support families. We have over 30 employees right now. When I took over the company 25 years ago or 27 years ago, we had about 4 employees in the entire company. We were small, we were very small. So to know that we can support 30 families or 30 plus families, that's a huge accomplishment. And it brings a terrific feeling to myself, my heart personally, to know that we're making a difference in the world today.
Yeah. Talk to us a little bit about some of those products, because to the average person, they'll read and they'll hear, hey, their hot dogs, their products are nitrate free, low sodium. What does that mean to the average person when we talk about being nitrate free and low sodium?
Okay, so today, most people still just want a hot dog. They want that old fashioned hot dog. But the trends that we find today are people looking for healthier alternatives. People need hot dogs every day. So, you know, if you're going to have a hot dog once a week, it's fine. If you're going to have it twice a week, great. But you don't really have a hot dog for dinner 7 nights a week. But because people are looking for healthier alternatives, we decided, and in the kosher industry, we were a trendsetter. We were the first company to produce an uncured, reduced fat and sodium beef hot dog. Now, what that means is we're using natural ingredients, celery and cherry and sea salt, actually. Those three ingredients, when combined together, react in such a way that they do the same job as nitrates. And nitrates are there to preserve the product. You have to make sure that there's no bacterial growth in your product, that it's a pure product, a clean product. So that's why you add the nitrates, because you want to stabilize the product. You want it to have a shelf life. So by adding these natural ingredients and removing the chemical, or I should say the synthetic nitrates, we've produced a better for you product.
And that's an awesome thing to understand. Somebody probably says, well, wow, a whole lot goes into a hot dog and meat like that. We just eat it, but there's a whole lot in the process.
It's truly a science. And I was amazed to learn over the years exactly what has to be done. Meat is very interesting. You know, you see a piece of meat, if it's marbleized, it's great. That's the type of meat that you would want to have for dinner. But for a hot dog making purposes, you want very, very lean meat, because lean meat is very high in protein. And the higher it is in protein, the more it can encapsulate the fat. The fat is what gives the hot dogs its flavor. Now, you can only put a certain percentage of fat into a hot dog. You can't go over, I think, 30%. We don't come close to that. But you need the protein to encapsulate the fat so that the hot dog comes out looking like it does, doesn't grease out, doesn't get fatty, doesn't leak on the grill, and has a nice hearty bite to it as well.
We got a little bit under a minute left, but I want to be able to talk real quickly. You talked about being on the grill. Memorial Day is around the corner. Labor Day will not be too far away. Give us some good recommendations. Of course, the NH products, but give us some good recommendations for what to do coming these holidays.
So I love grilling my A&H 14-ounce all beef kosher hot dog. The hot dog has no fillers. It's gluten-free. You don't have to worry. There's no shellfish or dairy products in the product itself because it's kosher. They plump up on the grill, and throw a little sauerkraut or mustard or chili or anything you like, really. That's the beauty of a hot dog. By itself, it's delicious, but you could add anything you'd like to it to make it your own.
Well, Seth, want to thank you so much for being with us. A&H Kosher, been in business for more than 60 years. Right here in the borough of the Bronx, where you saw they got their start, and they were really doing a great job. Now they're doing even more things. And if you haven't caught the announcement, yes, on May the 10th, they are now in Trader Joe's, and more to come. Seth, congratulations, and thanks for being with us here on Open.
Thank you for having me.
All righty. Well, we got to take a quick break, but we want to encourage you to find out more information. Don't hesitate to go to the A&H Kosher website, and then you can also follow them on their social media platforms as well. We do have more show coming up. Don't go anywhere. Open returns right after this. back to the show. Well, as kids return back to school and summer camp on the horizon in the coming months, educators and caregivers will be met with a number of challenges, and perhaps none as important and traumatic as child abuse. Instances of child abuse and neglect have been on the rise since the start of the pandemic, with children isolated at home for over a year, connected with others mostly through brief video calls and exchanges. Many instances of maltreatment and harm have gone unnoticed and sometimes even underreported. Here to share more with us is the New York Foundling's Vice President of Mental Health Services, Dr. Jessica Pesantez. And then also we've got the Senior Vice President for Mental Health Services, Dr. Ruth Gerson. And thank you both for being with us here on Open. And I guess I'll start first with you, Dr. Ruth. Share with us a little bit about child abuse. We hear the word, we hear the term, but some of us may not be so familiar as how child abuse is actually defined. So how would you put a definition on child abuse?
That's a great question. Unfortunately, we know that there are lots of different types of child abuse and that child abuse is very common. There's the things that we typically think about in terms of sexual abuse or physical abuse, but we often forget about neglect, or we forget about excessive corporal punishment or about emotional abuse. We know that these types of abuse are very common, and even families who really love their children and want to be good to their children, with the stress and strain of job losses and financial pressures and being stuck at home, that there is a lot more risk for child abuse happening during this pandemic.
A lot of children have actually had to suffer in child abuse, with numbers actually being underreported. How do we go about creating safe environments, and what are safe environments for young people?
Great question. I think that one thing that's been really important is that all involved in the system of care, as we call it, for the child, be creative about staying engaged and connected with them, because as you say, our youth have been indoors, out of routine, lack of outlets, especially those that are living in areas with even limited outdoor space. I know for us, who we work primarily with youth in care, in foster care, our psychotherapists have been creative about adapting the ways that they engage with youth virtually, and even doing things outdoors. So the most important thing is to maintain engagement and connection with the youth so they feel comfortable regardless of whether or not their routine has changed, their different opportunities to engage with other youth, go to school have changed, but they still feel that safe link, so to speak, with someone that they can trust, so they're able to express themselves and talk about what's going on.
Dr. Ruth, talk to me a little bit about building trust. That's important, right? And when we look at kids who've been in isolation for a long period of time, there's a lack of trust and sometimes some skepticism. How do you go about authentically building trust with a young person?
It's such a challenge, you're right, because they have realistically oftentimes experiences that make them wary or that make them uncertain whether this adult is really going to help them. And I think it's all about being really honest and transparent about what we can and cannot do, and being honest and transparent about what may happen, or what steps we as the adult will take, or what might come forth from a conversation, giving young people choices about how they talk to you. Do you want to talk over Zoom, or do you want to talk on the phone? Do you want to talk about this here, or would it be better to go outside? Do you want to type this with me because I see that there's other people in the room behind you, and I recognize that might make it hard to feel like you can have this safe space to talk with me. Giving them that sense of control and trust, respecting when they're resistant to talking about things or to opening up about things, because as you said, they have very good reasons oftentimes for being skeptical or uncertain about whether they can trust the adult. And sometimes we're talking about teenagers who just have a natural sort of, suspicion sometimes of adults that's totally age appropriate. We need to prove to them that we are trustworthy through our actions and through respecting them and their choices.
For the average common person, how do we actually identify what are these signs of child abuse? Because You can see a child, and the child could be acting out. The child could actually be quiet, and we're great labelers, if you will, of when we see somebody, we do our own self-diagnosis, but we can be very wrong in that diagnosis, not knowing the fact that a child could actually be being abused. What are some of the awareness signs that we need to pay attention to know if a young person is being abused?
The main thing that we speak with parents, guardians, other adults in children's lives to look for are any changes in behavior, any changes in the way that a youth expresses themselves. I think that in terms of focusing on change is something that's easy, so to speak, for people to be on the lookout for. And this way, someone's not just focusing on a particular behavior, because what we see is that depending on the kind of personality that a youth has or what their experience is, they might react or respond to abuse by crying. They might respond by fighting. So we really try not to specify a particular behavior to look for, but rather a change in behavior. As we all know, that people express themselves in different ways, and oftentimes adults in particular have difficulty, or it's hard to have patience with youth when they are fighting or acting out in an aggressive manner. But as professionals, what we know from research and experience is that such displays of behavior are actually quite common for those for youth that have been abused or have been exposed to other trauma or experienced loss, which is has been very common, especially over this past year. So.
Yeah. And what's it been like for both of you during the course of this past year? I reported earlier that we're in a time right now with a pandemic. Reporting of child abuse is going to be at an all-time low, simply because you're at home and you're in possibly that abuser's atmosphere. What's it been like in terms of trying to stay connected and also provide services for young people during a time when we really are in a place of isolation?
It has been hard. There's been so many barriers, even when we are, ready and engaged and available to provide telehealth services or to come to the communities where youth are and meet with them outside. It's been difficult. In the winter, it was hard to do outdoor work, and our technology is still not perfect. We have a lot of kids who don't have access to Wi-Fi or who don't have access to, smartphones with minutes so that they can talk with us. And our staff have had to be really, really creative in trying to find ways to connect with youth despite those barriers. And I think as much as it has been incredibly difficult and really disheartening in so many ways to see how hard it is, it's also really inspiring to me to see just how committed and how dedicated and how creative our therapists and other staff are to really making sure that they're able to connect with youth despite those things, and to see the youth responding.
Yeah. Can you share a little bit about the New York Foundling's child welfare program and what you got going on?
We feel really proud of the fact that we're able to provide somewhat of a continuum of services. So when we talk about child welfare, there's different levels of care and support that youth and families need. So, for example, we have preventive programming and a number of different kinds of treatment models that are, evidence-based on previous research and data. And well, that is consistent throughout, but we have those preventive programs that really focus on maintaining the youth in the home to prevent disruption to the family or removal of the youth from the home. And but there are times, as we know, that the youth is not safe in a particular environment and may be removed. And at that point, we have a very strong foster care program, mental health services, variety of mental health services that we provide to our youth in foster care. And the state actually requires comprehensive services to make sure that youth are receiving the quality of care, regardless of where they live, who they live with, and we can, for example, provide individual psychotherapy or group psychotherapy. So again, throughout their time in foster care, we provide those kinds of services. And then once they're discharged from foster care, we maintain a connection and again, make sure that they're set up in the community. They might still require and still be involved with child welfare services. So we're able to, as an agency, support from point A, from start to finish, so to speak.
And before we leave, for someone, a parent out there that may be struggling, or somebody that's a caregiver that recognizes they have a child in need, what would be the best possible advice that you would give them?
Well, I would say trust that instinct. Parents know what they need and what their kids need more than anybody. And there's no shame. We are all struggling. As a parent, I say we are all struggling. I put myself in that category in this really difficult time to be the kinds of parents that we want to be. And as Jessica said, I think one of the best, most sort of core values that we have at this agency is that we want to help families be the best parents that they want to be, to sort of achieve that vision for themselves. And we have so many different types of family support services that are available. So I would say reach out, give us a call. We're happy to help you think about what kinds of services that we provide would be right for you, or perhaps, find something in another agency if we don't provide exactly what you need.
Well, Dr. Ruth Gerson, thank you so much. Dr. Jessica Pesantez, thank you so much for being with us here and sharing with us here on Open as we find out more information during a very critical time as we learn more about child abuse. Thank you so much both for being here on the show.
Thanks for having us.
All righty. Well, I want you to know that if you want more information, what we do is we encourage you to go to their social media, and you can find them at the New York Foundling. Also, you can visit their website at newyorkfoundling.org. Now, we come to the end of our show today. I want to thank all of our guests for joining us, but most of all, you, the viewer, for tuning in. And if you missed any part of today's show, you can catch the recablecast on Bronx, that's channel 67. If you have Verizon Files, that'll be channel 2133, or anytime on the web at bronxnet.org. Now, if you're looking for a brand new episode, well, what do? Come on back Friday morning. My girl Rita Valentine will bring you a brand new episode featuring arts, entertainment, and more. Until then, I'm Daren Jaime saying take care, God bless, and most of all, keep this channel wide open.